Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Criterion Learning Series, covering year-end processing for the United States. Let me go to the next slide here. Just a quick disclaimer. I'm going to be mentioning some things today regarding deduction changes and everything like that, but I did want to disclaim that if you do have any questions regarding taxability of incomes, deductions, tax questions in general, please consult your accountant, your tax advisor, your tax consultant. Criterion Support cannot provide tax advice. What we can provide is once you have that information from that advisor and they say you need to set up a deduction this way or an income that way, then we can help you set that up in the system, but we cannot provide advice for how something should be taxed or not taxed. We can just tell you how the system will work. So let's look at some of the changes that are coming into effect for 2024. I did want to mention we do, of course, have a chat and a Q&A that we are monitoring. So if you do have questions or if you notice something that I have wrong on here, please let us know. Use the chat or the Q&A. I looked this stuff up. This is what I found from the IRS or from SHRM. So if I do have something wrong or I put in the wrong number, please, double check all these numbers. Like I said, we do our best to find this information out for you, but always double check it to make sure that we're right and your system is set up correctly. So talking about some of the changes here, 401ks, 403bs, and most 457 plans, the deduction limit for the normal under 50 deduction is $23,000 for 2024. The catch-up amount is not changing for those plans. It's still going to be $7,500 for next year. So you won't have to change anything as far as that is concerned. Looking at things like FSA, so FSA help is bumping up. It's going to $3,200. The FSA dependent care, I didn't put it on here, it stays the same. HSA, self-only coverage, $4,150 for 2024. And the family coverage is twice that, is $8,300. And there is no change to the HSA catch-up plan. So those limits don't change for next year. So those are some of them. And of course, you may have other deductions and incomes that I don't have listed here. There's, things that might affect you in particular. These are kind of the ones that a lot of companies have. So that's why I put the slide out here for these. Let's look at the system and we'll talk about how we're going to do things in here. So first off, basically nothing we're going to talk about today is in self-service because obviously this is all payroll processing and maintenance on the back end. So let's go ahead and just go over here to the back end of the system. We're going to go into settings because this is where you're going to do things like update the deduction limits for different deduction codes and check the settings for various things in the system. So that'll happen right here. So let's look at deductions. So we're going to be changing stuff is going to be under payroll administration. So things like you'll see deductions, incomes, you'll have tax rates down here. That's where we're going to be looking at these things here. Now, one thing to be aware of is that if you are going to change a limit for something, let's say like 401k, you want to do it after your last payroll of 2023. You want to bump that limit up and then have it suddenly start taking deductions out for people who've already maxed out for 2023. So what you would do as an example, if you go into a 401k, is you would scroll down a little bit and you'll see your limits right here. All right, now obviously I haven't updated my limits in a little while. It shows 19,000. So what I would do is simply type in the number that is the limit right there. Now your employer limit, of course, is based on, possibly your plan rules and stuff like that. Maybe it's something like mine of 24,000. Maybe it's 50% of what the employee limit is. Whatever that might be, of course, you'll put the limit in there. There is a maximum that you can contribute combined employee and employer. So you can't exceed that. But this is not necessarily like a hard limit like 23,000. It could be much less for your particular company. So make sure that is correct in there. Now, if you have your deductions set up as a pool, which many times people do with 401k because they might have a regular dollar amount one and then a regular percentage, and or you have a Roth and you've got a regular, and of course you have flat amount and percentage for those. So you want to pool those together. That's what this checkbox right here allows you to do, is to say, okay, all of these 401ks are going to share the same limit. So you're not contributing, let's say 20,000 in 401k and then also 20,000 in Roth, because you're not allowed to do that. So make sure that box is checked if you're doing that. This pool right here, one of your deduction codes of 401k is going to be what we call the pool parent. So in my example here, I'm making this code that I'm in the parent. That's why this is blank. And what I would do is go to all the other codes that are using it. Let's say like this 401k Roth, make sure it's checked off here. And then I come down here and I choose that previous code as the parent. You'll notice now I don't need a touch limit because it's already updated. It was updated on this code. So all of the associated codes are going to have that limit in there. All the pooled, I guess you can call them children, are going to have the limit already updated. You won't need to go through and do that. All right, so you'll just have to do that once. And the same thing if you have catch up. One of these is probably a percentage, one's probably a dollar amount. Same idea. If you're going to do the pool, you want to make sure that you have the limit in here for the parent, 7,500. And then in the other one, if it's pooled, you want to make sure that it's talking back to the parent. So you'll notice here, one of these I might have multiple. Don't worry about that, but you want to make sure this is talking to the parent. What you would want to do is not have them with the same name like I do. You probably want to put like a dollar sign or something to differentiate between the two. So that's how that would work. And of course, updating, let's say a 457, if you got that, or a 403B, and you don't have a 401k, is going to be the same process. You would go into the code, make sure the limit is in here correctly for this. Now, of course, an employee is going to put in their amount. They might say they're going to do $100 a paycheck as an example. It will pull the limit from the deduction. And of course, they're only doing $100 a paycheck. And let's say you're semi-monthly, they're never going to reach the new limit for 2024. But, maybe for some reason you want to put a lower limit on the employee, you're welcome to do that. You just can't go to a higher limit. So if I wanted to put $1,000 as my limit on an employee record, I could go to, let's say, this person here. I could have the 401k deduction on them, and I could have a lower limit than the limit that's in the code. So if I had the 401k, let me just show you as an example. Here's the limit there. I could actually put in less than 23,000 if I wanted to. All right. So, and of course, the effective date needs to be in there. Now, one of the things that you probably want to do, that's a good idea, you don't have to do this, is if you tie it to a benefit plan, you can have the system roll over from one plan year to the next. That makes it nice so that it will pick up the new deduction limits and stuff like that if you do a benefit plan. Now, this is something I'm not going to cover the whole setup of this in the system, but you can set up a benefit plan, let's say called 401k, linked to that deduction, and then you can do an open enrollment that auto rolls over from one year to the next. So that way you don't need to worry about, okay, on January 1st, I got to make sure all the deduction limits are changed and everything like that on individual employees, because it will just roll over. If you have questions on how that would work, you can reach out to our support team and they can help you with that, setting up the benefit plan. If you don't have that, give you some guidance on how that works. And that would work, let's say, for an HSA plan or FSA plan or things like that. Same idea. You could put those in there. Now, typically, let's say with an FSA or an HSA, people are probably going to go through an open enrollment and change those amounts. So you may not want to have the auto rollover on those, because I might say, well, next year, I don't need as much as I did this year or whatever. So I'll make those changes in open enrollment. But 401k and retirement, those types of plans, you may want to just do an auto rollover at the end of the year. All right, so that is deductions. Now, the other thing you'll want to check in deductions before I go to incomes is the deduction type right here. Make sure this is correct. This is going to affect the taxability of deductions. So we have a whole bunch that come with the system to cover different scenarios, different deduction types in the system. So as an example, I'm in my 401k deduction. So I have it set as a 401k deferral. That's going to treat it as a pre-tax deduction for the various federal and state taxes and local taxes where that's applicable. You'll see other ones in here for like 401k over 50, 403B and 457, all these other ones that are there, 125 plans as for medical and so forth. So you want to make sure these are right. Now, this is where, again, you'll need to make sure your tax person tells you, okay, this is a 125 plan or whatever. We can help you with, okay, they tell you it's a 125, let's set it up that way. And so we can do that for you. But we're not going to advise you on how to set up a deduction code. Just if you say, hey, I want to set up a 401k, what do I do? We can tell you the deduction type should be 401k, but we're not going to go through and give you tax advice. So that's how that would work with there. Now, this will also impact where it shows up on the W-2, but you can also override where things show up on the W-2, or if you want them to show in another box. So let's say you have a deduction and you need to do like an imputed income amount or something like that, where you need it to show on the W-2 in a certain box. Maybe it needs to show in box 14 or box 12, or you'd like it to show in 14 just for information purposes. That's where the system labels come into play. I'm going to pick this one here. And if I want this to show in a certain box on the W-2, I can do that right here with these codes. Now, I don't have W-2 boxes set up. I have the ones for Canada, but it's the same idea. Well, actually, I have box 12. So I do have box 12. I don't have box 14 set up. Your system probably already has system labels for box 14 and box 12 in there. So you don't need to add these. But if I do this, it will show in that box 12 or box 14, even though maybe it normally does not. So let's say you're setting up the Code DD stuff for the Affordable Care Act. You may want it to show in box 12 Code DD by adding this in here. Or maybe, like I mentioned, you've got something you want to show in box 14, add a system label. If it doesn't exist, box_14, like this, and then it will show in box 14 when you go to do your W-2s. So that's how that would work in there. If you wanted to show in those boxes, you can do that. If it's not already here, that's okay, because you can do that even after you've generated your W-2s and you realize, oh no, this code's not showing in the box 14. You can always come back in, add the system label, and regenerate your W-2s. What you can't do is if you inadvertently had a deduction set up incorrectly taxable wise, let's say your 401k was not set as pre-tax all year, you can't just go and fix it in January by changing the deduction type to 401k and hoping that it will update all the payroll that happened in the year. That's where you might need to make an adjustment, and you're going to need to adjust the employee's taxable wages and so forth like that. Probably reach out to support to give you some help on that. That's something that you can do through an import. You'll probably owe the employee some money, or they'll get their taxes back, that kind of thing. But if it's not set up right in this is going forward. The system label, like box 14, you can actually do that kind of retroactively. You can still update it right on the W-2s. All right. Now, the same thing would apply if I go over to incomes. So when you look at your income codes, you're going to want to look at them and make sure that they are set up correctly. So let's say I click on this break, whatever this is here. Again, we have a compensation type that can affect the taxability and also where things would show up on the W-2. So if you have a new type of thing, maybe you're doing this adoption assistance and it's new, we have different compensation types to handle this and to either make it show right on the W-2 or, depending on how it's taxed federally, locally, on the state, those are different things. So you'll see a lot of different ones that are out here for these. You may or may not have these apply to you. You'll see different things out here for these. I'm not going to go through all of them, but different ones that are out here. All right, so you can see how that's done. The same type of thing we have with system labels. Now, if you already have a system label in here for something else, you don't need to worry about, shift rate that's going to show on my W-2. No, it's not. You would just need to worry about the box 14 or box 12 situations like that. All right, now showing in boxes 1, 3, and 5, where the taxable wages are, and then your state tax and locals, that is controlled by right here in the pay type or the compensation type. All right, so that would need to be updated. Now, if you do happen to have an income that has an annual limit, you can see here we do have different limits in here, annual as well as lifetime period and monthly. So it's possible you need to update these. Maybe you've got some type of annual bonus or something like that you give your employees and they have a certain limit on it or whatever, you can update those in here. Again, make sure you do that after your last payroll of the year. Otherwise, you might start paying something and you didn't mean to if you update it now and you still have a couple more payrolls to go. So just do that at the time. Tax rates. So this is something where you'll need to probably update your tax rates, especially for unemployment. So that's something that we can't really control because it's pretty much based off of employer, and the state's going to send you a letter, or you go online and they say, okay, your new unemployment rate for 2024 for Connecticut or whatever state is going to be a certain percentage. So you would go out there. Let me just pick, let me just do Connecticut SUI, and I would have a rate in there. So I do like 1124. All right. And then I could come in here and I could put in the rate for this next year. And let's just say it's 3%, something like that. Maybe it's 3.2, whatever that rate is for that. So that would work here for that rate. You may want to make sure you have the right tax identifier that shows up on various forms. You might, if you're using Atrix especially, or you're using the tax filing service, that tax identifier, you want to make sure that's right. But you can do the effective date for this. So if you know now what your rate's going to be for next year, you could go ahead, add a new version of that same tax code you're already using, and put in 1124 with the new rate and things like that. Now, I'm not aware. I haven't worked in every single state. I haven't done payroll in every state. I'm not aware of anyone where there's a wage base that we need to update. Perhaps our support team has worked with that. If you do need to do that, we have these other fields in here. And just so you're aware, the new feature where you have forms that are related to tax codes, this is so the employee can fill out like their W-4 or a state tax form. That's a new feature we added. So let's say you're in Connecticut and there's a Connecticut state tax form. You can set that up in the system and link it in right over here. I don't have one up for Connecticut, but you'll see like there's the W-4. So you could use that. You don't have to do that like for your year end. That's just so your employees can fill out the form in self-service. All right, so that's your tax rates and making sure those are updated. We, of course, are going to handle the state tax rate changes and the federal changes and so forth. That's all just part of the tax engine. But the SUI, the state unemployment, those things are something that is individualized for each employer. So you'll need to make sure that's there. The other thing that may change, maybe on January 1st, but of course it could change during the year, is workers' compensation. So you'll want to make sure that you check these rates. Maybe now you know what your new rates are, or you'll have them, in the future. So you can come in here and change these rates here. Now I have these ones effective in January of this year, but maybe I've got a new thing in there for next year. I wouldn't want to update this because it's only November. I probably would have a couple more payrolls in December. So what I would probably want to do is come in here and say, all right, for this education one as an example, here's my 1124 rate. Oops, put a slash there. And maybe it's for a certain state. So I could tie it to a certain state. And then here is the rate per 100. If there's an employee contribution per 100, if there's a limit per year, you could put those numbers in there ahead of time if you like. So you could go ahead and say, okay, my rate per 100 is, I don't know, 125, whatever it is. For this one, maybe there's an employee contribution, maybe there's a modifier. You could put those rates in for that particular workers' comp code. Now, if you don't see the workers' comp code in there, maybe you're starting to do something in a new workers' comp classification, that's something that you would need to set up in your system configuration under code tables. One of our user tables is workers' compensation. It is right here, and you would add your codes here. All right, so you can just put in, whatever they are. Now in mine, I have them with names and not the actual 4-digit number, but that's up to you. You can do that however you like. So you can see how that works in there. Other stuff you'll probably need to do is you'll need to set up your holidays. So come into my holidays here. Now, this you don't need to do if you're not doing time-related stuff, because this does affect the time. But maybe you just want your calendar in here anyways, just even if you're not doing timesheets, so people can know what your calendar is. They can subscribe to the holiday calendar and so forth. So you can go ahead and do this. Now, I've already done this one. Let me just delete this so I can kind of show you how that works. So what you could do is you could copy your one from the previous year and clone it and then just update the date. So here I've got 2023 holidays. So if I check the box next to it, I can hit this clone button up here. And then I'll at least copy everything over, and I just need to update the date. So I'd hit clone, put in the right year, and I'll just call this 24. Right, and clone that up. So now there's my clone for next year, and now I can go through and update this. You'll see it's already put in 24 as the year. All I would need to do is go through and update the dates, because they probably don't line up exactly with what they were last year. So for an example, the 1st is Monday. Okay, that's good. That one is a good one. July 4th, if it's like a Sunday or something like that. All right, so that one's good. But you can just go through each one. All right, is this one right? No, it's probably the 15th. Okay, and just update those as appropriate. So very simple to do that. Of course, I could type in the dates if I don't want to use the calendar, but really easy to do that. All right. When you do clone, we do add the word clone at the end, so you'll probably want to clean that up and save those changes. So that's going to be your holiday calendar for the year. The next thing is going to be your payroll schedule. You could do this now. You don't have to wait till the end of the year. You can create a payroll schedule for next year. So I have 3. You may have 1. You may have more than mine. It doesn't really matter. When you go in here, you're going to see your calendar. Now, I already have done this for 2024 for this one, but I could delete this one because I haven't done any payrolls. Oh, I guess I have done a payroll for next year. Okay, let me see if I have one for biweekly. I don't. All right. So this is how you would do it. What you're going to do is you're going to have your current year and possibly previous years in here. And all you need to do is click new. When you do that, it's going to say, oh, okay, how many periods do you want? Well, I'm doing biweekly, so it's going to be 26 periods. It already knows the start date because the previous one, let me show you, ended on 11/18. So it knows, okay, the next one's going to start on 11/19. So all I need to do is just tell it make 26 periods, and it generates the calendar for next year. Now, you may need to go through and update your pay dates if this is on a holiday or something like that. You might need to go and update those based off of that. You can come in here and say, okay, well, the 19th, then maybe you're closed or something on that day, and you can go ahead and change that. So you change those individually if you need to, and then save your changes. And of course, if you have multiple schedules like I have, you'll have to do it for each one. Go ahead and put those in there. All right, another possible change would be minimum wage. So if you have minimum wages set up, you'll see we do have the effective date out there. So you can say, all right, for this particular state or city or whatever, the new effective rate for January is going to be this number there. So you might say, let's just say I'll use one that I know here, San Diego, and right, and I don't know what their minimum wage is, but let's just say $17.50. All right, and that's 1/1/24. All right, so that's something that you can do and go ahead and update those. Again, you can do this one early because it does have the effective date, and then of course that's when it's going to go into play. Now this might change middle of the year too, so this could be something you have to do in the middle of the year. All right, so now you've done all the setup stuff. Let's look at some of the reports that are out there. So I'm already in payroll. So when I go to my reports, I have this over here on the left-hand side. So you're probably familiar with a lot of these reports. You've been running payroll all year long. So we're going to look under payroll reports, and you're going to run things like your deduction reports over here, your income reports over here. This will help you when you're going to look at your W-2s and see, okay, here's my total 401k for the year. And you can look at those numbers and see what it looks like. And if you want to go through each individual employee, you could do that. So you might say, all right, here's my deduction totals. Now, I don't know if I really have a whole lot out there. Depending on when you run this, you're either going to do the current year if you're doing this in December or now, or if it's already January, you can go back to the previous year. Of course, you could type in a date range if you want, but when I do this, it already pre-fills it. I could always say custom and just type it in. All right, so super easy to do that there. I'm not going to break it down by schedule or cost center or anything like that because I want to get everybody. I might do it by employer. If you have multiple employers, you probably want to do it by employer just to make sure it's right and run this report. Now, like I said, I don't have a whole lot of payrolls processed, so these numbers are going to be kind of low, but you'll see like, oh, here's my 401k, my Roth, et cetera. You've probably got more than $400 in there, but those are the numbers. When you look at your W-3 and you've got your total for box 12, I think it's C for 401k. I apologize if I'm the wrong code. And you see the number. Oh, okay, great. It matches up. Now, of course, it might be multiple 401ks. You got 401k dollar and percentage. You'd have to add those. We don't do that on this report. But that's how you could check the totals on your W-3 and other reports used for taxes to make sure things are right. If you want to break it down by employee, you can run the deduction summary or the deduction total by employee report to break those down by employee and deduction codes if you want to. Same type of thing with incomes. Again, run this for the year for the appropriate employer, and this will give you the totals here. So maybe you've got like some type of reimbursement code, and you want to make sure that that's not showing on the W-2 or something. And whatever it is, you'll look at your totals here and make sure those numbers match up to what you're seeing in like boxes 1, 3, and 5. Of course, when you're looking at 1, 3, and 5, that's taxable wages and not total wages. So you'll want to say, okay, take your wages here, take out the pre-tax stuff, and does that match up with box 1, box 3, box 5, and the state and local stuff? All right, now speaking of those tax codes, taxable wages totals, this is going to show what's going to be in boxes 1, 3, and 5, and et cetera. So when I come down here, I'm going to run this for the current year. Again, I don't want to necessarily run it for a certain location or anything like that, just because I don't want to skip somebody who maybe moved to a different location or something. So run this for the whole year. Now, ignore the Canada stuff on here, but you'll see federal. Okay, here's my taxable wages. Does that match up with what I'm seeing with the total for box 1? And here's my total taxes, 49,000. Is that equal to box 2? And then go down, Social Security, Medicare, et cetera, the state taxes. Make sure those totals match up with what's showing on your W-3. All right. Now, speaking of the W-3 and the W-2s, those are going to be under tax filing. So you'll see in here, W-2 and W-3. Now, if you're using Atrix or using the tax service, it's a little different, but you can still look at these here, even if you're using those services, just to verify that it's right. So you go to your W-2. So you're going to do your employee one and what you're going to do it for, 23. And go ahead and run this. Now, you could run this today, even though you're not doing your W-2s. You maybe got a couple more payrolls just to make sure you're familiar with what this looks like. Or maybe you're ordering paper and you want to just make sure it lines up. What does it look like? Do I need blank stock? Do I want to have pre-printed? Stuff like that. You can go ahead and run it today. Now, you wouldn't want to publish it out to your employees because they're going like, wait a minute, well, how come it doesn't match up with what I'm seeing in my year to date in December because you did it early. But you can still look at it today and look at these numbers on here. So this will generate. Now, the other thing you'll want to look at is you want to just verify the employer stuff is correct, because maybe there was a typo and nobody's noticed it, and the address is wrong, or maybe your company name is wrong or something like that. Make sure you check that stuff on there. I'm going to let this generate. What I'm talking about, of course, is if I do find it wrong while this is generating, you can go to your employer settings and you can make sure the information is correct in there. Now, you probably would have noticed this when you're doing your 941s, but it's certainly possible that your company name is wrong. So you typed in the wrong name, or it's supposed to be Inc. or something like that. Make sure that's correct there. Make sure the national identifier, which is the FEIN, make sure that's correct in there. And then addresses, of course, you've got in here, you got your primary address. Make sure the address is right, because that's going to show on there. So that's going to be under your work locations. So you can go ahead and look at that. Let's see, did it finish? Yeah. So you'll see here AFC Richmond, Norwalk, Connecticut. You'll want to make sure that information is right, because obviously it's going to print on all these. Okay. Same type of thing with the employee information. Now, this one obviously is more employee related, but you'll see the information on here. So here's the individual, box 1, 3, 5, 2, 4, 6, etc. And of course, the stuff might be in the different box 12s and 14s. But let's say his address is incorrect. You don't want to mail it out with the wrong address if you know it's wrong. Now, you probably want to have your employees double check this stuff, but this is something you just change on the employee record and regenerate the W-2 if you need to. If his address, is not really address 1, apartment 3, maybe you actually want to put in, 123 Main Street or something, you can always regenerate this with the right address if you need to. All right, but you can see here, I've got my stuff. Now mine is doing I'm printing it all. All right, so it's got the different copies and it's got the instructions and everything, and then it goes to the next person. That's why I have 333 pages, because I'm doing so many different ones here, but I can go down and I can look at all the different employees and what they've gotten for the year. Now, I have the option up here to publish. That's something you need to set up in the system. This will allow you to email it out to your employees and or publish it out to self-service. This will not be available if you haven't actually set that up. That's something that support can help you out with. We have documentation on how to publish as well. Let's look at the W-3 real quick, and then we will finish it off, just so we can look what's going to be on here for this. Probably familiar with the W-3, but if not, it's going to look something like this. Again, make sure your address is correct, company name is correct on there, but here's your totals. All right, so you got your 135, your 246 on there. You've got your different deduction codes that might go out here, maybe your tip employer, so you might have things in there, and you'll see these on here. Okay, so again, if you compare that with like the totals report, I seem to remember 417,000 was our number there, and 49,000. I remember those numbers, so those are right. Even your kind of employer here, make sure this is correct. This is something that you set up in your payroll settings. I didn't talk about that, but I have mine set up as a federal government. That's not correct. I'm not the federal government. In your payroll settings, you can say what kind of filer you are. So, you know, maybe you're none apply. That would show up correctly right here. Check that box versus that one. All right, so that's how that works in there. All right, so you can see how that all looks on here and how to do this. This one, obviously, you don't publish because this is an employer one, but here's where you file it. Now, of course, we do have things out here for the 1096 and 1099. If you are a 1099 filer or 1096 filer, you can run those as well. I don't believe I have any income set up that way, but they run the same way. So you could say, you know, 2023, do I have this? And then generate these. I think I'm going to get a bunch of zeros because I don't remember processing any 1099s this year. But this will be your 1099s, and then your 1096 would be the other option right there. While that's running, let me switch over to another one here because we don't have all day. Here's the 1096. When we do this one, you need to tell whether you're doing it for miscellaneous or non-employee compensation, and then the year. Oh, I'm missing my 1099 settings. That's probably why it's not running, because I haven't been running 1099s all year. I haven't done my settings. But if you've been doing 1099s all year, you probably already have your settings already done. If not, you can reach out to support. We can help you to set those up in the system here. But that's your 1099s and 1096s. Now, of course, we do have Atrix is an option out here. I don't really have mine configured to do that, but the government reporting in Atrix is where you can go. Here's what a 1099 looks like. As I said, I don't really have anybody with a 1099, but government reports is where Atrix resides. So this is where you can have Atrix do the 1099 or the W-2s for you and the W-3, etc. So you can do those right here. Now, mine's not going to work because I don't have it set up. But when you do this, it gives you a nice grid to do your taxes, and you can verify stuff by employee, and it also has total. So it's a really nice grid. I almost might want to say, even if you're not going to use Atrix, look at the grid because I think it makes it easy to look at this information. You could set up an account for Atrix for free without having to do anything. This is going to make me log in, and I don't have an account. So it's not going to work in here. But this will allow me to use Atrix. So Atrix is, you could sign up for free. You don't have to use it to actually, like, you don't have to have them do the forms for you to actually get the grid. So if you want to just do the 1099, or sorry, the W-2 and W-3 out of our system, but look at it in Atrix, you're certainly welcome to do it. They'll even show you how much it costs if you want them to print it and send it out to you. Maybe you decide, hey, it's worthwhile to spend X number of dollars versus buying all this paper and envelopes and, you know, postage and time to do all that stuff. They will do it for you. So that's an option. All right, let me switch back over here. Hopefully we covered a lot in a very short amount of time and you got a lot out of this. Let's talk about our future upcoming webinars here. So in a week, we're going to be talking about Canadian year-end again. We did one a couple weeks ago, and then we're going to do one again next week. So if you happen to also be, in Canada, please join us. Or if you're just curious what Canada does, you could join us for that one. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to cover the United States again, basically the exact same thing as you just saw. So we're going to see that out there. And then in January, because we're going to take a pause for the holidays, we're not going to do one right after Christmas. We're going to go to cover Affordable Care Act reporting. We're actually going to do that one twice since they're not due in January, they're due later. We're going to cover it first, beginning in January, Then we're going to go to some HR things of career path and immersive onboarding. And then we're going to come back to ACA in February because I believe I have it scheduled for the 20th. That's more closer to when it's due. So if you're interested in Affordable Care Act reporting, that's something you need to do. Then go ahead and join us in January or February to talk about that. So thank you so much for joining us today. If you do have questions, I've mentioned a few times, please feel free to reach out to us. You'll see our phone number, email address right there. Of course, you can just hit support in the system, the little question mark in the top right, and get that information on there as well. You can also submit a ticket right in the system as well. So thank you for joining us. If I don't see you before January, I hope everybody has a great year end. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, holidays. Everybody enjoy yourselves. If you have a vacation, please have a good time, and I hope to see you all soon. Thank you so much.